Hey friends, welcome to episode 62 of Stand Up, and here now is the speech that the president should have given. My fellow Americans, the next few months are going to be very hard. For many of us, harder than anything we've faced in our lifetimes. Life in our country is about to change. We must unify against this threat like we unified after 9/11. And indeed, this virus threatens to kill more Americans than terrorism ever has. But we can defeat it, and we will defeat it. My administration has a plan to lead this fight. I will outline that plan in a moment. But more important than the plan is this. We must all own this fight. Defeating this outbreak will take science and medicine, but it will also take unity and partnership from all of us. For now, medicine cannot defeat this disease, but people can. We have no vaccine, we have no treatment, although we are working furiously to develop both. Until then, all we have is us. Our choices, our decisions, our behavior. That is how we will do this. Here is the plan. Our most important priority over the coming months is to protect our highest risk citizens and the hospitals that will work to save them if they become ill. We've seen what happened in Wuhan, China, and what is happening in Iran and Italy. We should not imagine that it cannot happen here. Make no mistake, this is a dangerous disease. While most who contract it become only mildly ill, it is extremely deadly for the elderly and people with chronic health problems. You may be one of those people, or you may love one of those people. All of us have a stake in this. That is why tonight I am announcing national policy guidance on social distancing, and tomorrow I will be speaking with every governor in the country to secure their commitment to implement this guidance. This must be a whole of society effort. We do not want to lock down our population as China did. But to avoid that, we must apply universal and aggressive public measures to slow the spread. Even if you are young and low risk, you can still contract and spread it, and that threatens those who are at higher risk. So I am calling on all communities to suspend all mass gatherings over 50 people. I applaud the brave and difficult decisions made today by the NCAA and the NBA. They are leading by example. I call on other businesses and civic leaders to follow them. These important measures are how we can protect our health system. We must ensure that those who do fall sick can obtain the quality care that they need and survive. Aggressive social distancing measures help achieve this by reducing the number of sick people at any one time. Reducing the number of people who are sick at once is the best way to keep our health system from being overwhelmed. And that, in turn, helps not just COVID-19 patients, but also everyone else who must seek treatment in a hospital. You will learn more about these measures in the coming days, and I beg you to abide by them. Social distancing, along with hand washing, are the most important things that average Americans can do to defeat this disease. Next, we must protect Americans who are highest risk from this virus. I've directed HHS to refocus the federal public health service to reinforce their state and local counterparts on outreach and support to the high-risk people and facilities. But they cannot do this alone. We must all work to ensure that every senior's home, retirement community, and other high-risk facility has the support it needs to prevent infections. And I urge all Americans to take ownership of this. If you have loved ones in a high-risk facility, join us on this effort. God bless you, and God bless America, if you're into God. If you're not, light a candle and keep hope alive. That speech was written by Jeremy Conondike, who's an expert in global outbreak preparedness at the Center for Global Development. I'll try to get him on the show. Speaking of which, let's do a show, shall we? I'm Pete Dominic, and this is Stand Up. Welcome to class, kids. A class where every episode we learn from experts and other interesting people about the issues that matter most to you, your family, your community, your planet. What could matter more right now than a pandemic sweeping the globe? You've seen the numbers. You know about the news. It's affecting your local community. I don't have to tell you what's happening. You know. This is new for all of us, and I'm here for you. You're there for me, that's for sure. Thank you very much to all of the folks supporting this podcast on Patreon with a paid subscription. Every episode, I'll thank 5 subscribers. Ben Walter, $5. Robert Founds, $10. Andrew Mall, $25. Mary Walsh, $5. Greg Jones, $5. Thank you guys very much. Subscribe at patreon.com/Pete Dominic to help sustain this podcast. And if you want me to plug something or advertise something on the podcast, I'd be really happy to do that for you as well. So let me know what you want me to plug, and we'll get it on here. Joining me today on the show, I've got the great Wajahat Ali again. We always have great conversations. He's a really good friend of mine, talking about the vulnerable member of his family, his beautiful 4-year-old daughter who had a liver transplant after being diagnosed with stage 4 liver cancer. Also joining me, again, infectious disease expert, Dr. Meghan May. Lots to talk about with her. But first, I want to share my conversation with my best friend, David Campbell. David Campbell is a very well-known singer and television anchor down in Australia. In Sydney, he is basically like the host of the Today Show down there, and he is a very well-respected guy. I know him because he used to live in New York, and we palled around back in our 20s when he was on Broadway, and I was an up-and-coming stand-up comedian. We became really good friends and stayed friends throughout the years, and he has been absolutely amazing, supportive friend to me each and every day since I lost my job at SiriusXM. He's peeled me off the ground many a time. The reason I wanted to reach out to him today is because he just interviewed Rita Wilson, who is Tom Hanks' wife. Tom Hanks is down in Australia filming a movie, and as you probably know, Tom Hanks and his wife, Rita, have been diagnosed with coronavirus. And Campbell, my friend, as we call him, he has to be quarantined now. He has to be isolated because he interviewed Rita Wilson for their TV show. And so I reached out to him. We had a conversation about what he's going through. We had some laughs, some yucks. We talk each and every day, and I thought this would be an interesting conversation to begin with. Then we'll get to Dr. Meghan May and Wajahat Ali. I'm really happy with all these conversations. I think you're going to get a lot out of them. Let's get to it right now with David Campbell, all the way from Australia.
Software. Now, have you tried turning it off and on?
Yeah. How you doing? I see you.
Yeah, good man.
Hey. I just pressed record. You want to just jump right in?
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay. So I wanted to just start by telling you about a text I just got from someone that you know and respect, Gary V.
He's really ahead of the game, Gary V. You got a text from him?
I just got a text from motivational speaker Gary V. He said,
what did Gary V have to say?
Well, I think it's perfect for you, given the situation that you're in, having just tested for a possible coronavirus after hanging out with Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson. And it's this from Gary V. And I want you to take this to heart. Okay? It says, I want you to know something. Everything is going to be amazing. Please be thoughtful and careful and diligent and be grateful for everything we have, not focus on any small annoyances. I'm sure you're getting a ton of texts. I just wanted you to have this.
Well, how come? Are you on some sort of like text thread with Gary V? Or is that really Donald Trump's like alternate sort of everything's going to be great?
I saw it. Just calm down. Everybody is going to be, it's already subsiding.
It's really, once the heat turns up here, baby, it's going to be gone. It's like a miracle.
I can't believe they canceled baseball.
Really, what's the worst that could happen? Broadway's gone? I never liked show queens anyway.
I didn't like Broadway. We don't need the musicals anyway, especially the musicals. So,
let's Trump the musical, delightful.
All right, dude, you've been doing interviews all day. You're self-isolating, self-quarantining?
Yeah.
So tell everybody what happened. You are
Okay. Well,
I've already given the introduction, a little bit about who you are and what you do, but you are interviewing Rita Wilson. She's down there with Tom Hanks because he's filming.
Tom Hanks is down here filming a Baz Luhrmann film based on the life of Elvis Presley.
Huh.
Tom Hanks is playing Colonel Tom Parker, and it is filming on the Gold Coast, which is north of where I live. It's the state above us in New South Wales. Very big state. A lot of productions happen there. Thor Ragnarok filmed there, Aquaman, the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. It's a really big sort of place where people come and film from Hollywood. So obviously they're getting a lot of kickbacks to the government, which is good, provides jobs. So Tom is up there.
You just call him Tom?
Tommy Tom. Well, I figured if I potentially have a coronavirus from him and his wife, we're on a first name basis now. So they were in Sydney because she's a very accomplished musician as well as actress. She's done some great country sort of Nashville type albums. So she'd done a gig in Brisbane, up where they've been filming on the Gold Coast. And then she did a show at the Sydney Opera House on Saturday night. Now, my show interviewed Rita. I wasn't on the air that day last year. And she enjoyed it so much and our team so much, she agreed to come into the studio when she was here. So she lived up to that promise. And we had Rita live as an exclusive on our show, which is a big deal. So she came in. She was very hyper aware about no touching, and we had to elbow bump when she came in. We had to do some of that, and we sort of made a joke about the corona, as everyone is, because gallows humor is good and healthy. And she sat down for about 7 or 8 minutes, did the interview, went off with one of our team. She then recorded her performance, which we then played live in the show. But all in all, she spent about 12 to maybe 15 minutes maximum in our tiny studio, which doesn't have any real windows or real light or any sort of God's antibacterial coming in to help us out here. So we were contained. After that, sort of went on our way and sort of thought that was really good, and she was really nice. And then yesterday I got a message from you and saw the Deadline article straight away.
I was the first person to tell you?
You were one of the first. I got a phone call from one of the producers saying, hey, just letting you know, Rita and Tom have just tested for coronavirus. I hung up, and you must have texted while that was happening, and your text was there. And the Deadline article, which is the first one that came up on my phone, was there about them. And then your next test was, oh my God, did you guys kiss?
Did you?
No, we did not kiss. We elbow touched.
That's right. So how did you then react? How did you react? How did you deal with that? And then, what was the official word from your bosses? And then from, you went to the hospital yesterday. You ended up going to get tested, right?
Yeah. So here in Australia, we have, not necessarily universal healthcare, but we have a very good healthcare system here, which is paid for by us through our taxes. So they had set up triages at the hospitals here. But first I called my own physician and asked whether I should go into his surgery to get tested, because the messaging here, Pete, is different to the messaging there, which has been almost non-existent. But here it's just confused. Where should you go? What should you do? So I called my doctor first. They said they thought I needed a referral, which they then were going to email me to get to the hospital. They then emailed me. So they didn't know I didn't need a referral. Then they emailed me saying, just go straight there. So I came home, got my car, got a couple of masks, because my wife traveled to America. You saw her. She traveled in masks, and she's like, we should get more masks. So we stockpiled on a few masks. So that came in handy. I went to the emergency ward with my co-host and the producer, who was mainly in contact with Rita. And we went to a triage unit. It was all very fast. You had to write your name, your phone number, your Medicare number, and your address and your date of birth on a piece of paper. Give it to them. You sat in a room. There was maybe 12 other patients in the room. You get swabbed, where they stick a really uncomfortable stick up each nostril. And then they advise. And so that's where I sort of talked to them, because my boss from work had already then spoken to the the Department of Health and Services here in New South Wales, where I live, and spoken to the head of that. And that doctor there had basically said, we would consider anything under 15 minutes to half an hour to be a casual contact and low risk. However, when I was in the hospital in the triage with the nurses who are doing this all the time and they're getting information, I assume from the government, they clarified my contact with Rita Wilson is high risk.
Why?
And because I'd been in close proximity, less than a meter. Let's say she showed symptoms the night after seeing me. So that was a Monday. We filmed in the morning. That evening, Tom and her showed major symptoms of being sick with what they thought was a cold or a flu. So she showed symptoms that night. So if she spat near me or, if she breathed towards me and she sat next to me and then my co-host sat next to me. So in a round desk situation, I was closest to her. So I'm considered by those nurses as high risk.
So when do you find out the results of the test? How long did they tell you it would take? I mean, this kind of time in between when you find out that you are exposed to getting the test to find out the results has got, and how come you're not losing your mind?
I'm not losing my mind because I feel fine. And I think that, I spoke to the head of Department of Health Services yesterday and sort of said, well, why should I not necessarily trust you, but the mixed messaging here is really difficult. You're telling me I'm a casual, I have casual contact here, and yet I'm told by the emergency services that I am a high risk. Now, I feel perfectly fine. I've had no symptoms of anything since seeing Rita. He said, that's really good. So did the nurses. They said, you will probably come back as negative still. And in the next, hopefully 24 to 48 hours, I'll find out that the information. Once I get that test back, I still have to self-isolate from the time I take the test for 14 days to stop spread of it incubating in me in some other way. So this is that sort of, I guess, that flattening the curve we're all hearing about, that if you are in contact, you've got to try and minimize the effect so that society doesn't completely crumble.
And that's exactly what you're doing. I hate to tell you this. I'm looking at you on Skype. You're actually starting to look like me.
Well, the weird thing is actually then telling your kid's school. It's actually telling your kid's school that you have to go, hi, those newsletters you send out. Well, Woody from Toy Story might have given me the coronavirus here. Don't tell the kids, but Woody's highly contagious.
Has Tom or Rita reached out to you?
No, they have not.
Well,
I think they've got enough on their plate.
The other thing
the big problem is, and I think I was saying this to you, Pete, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the big problem is that Tom Hanks is literally the nightmare scenario for the WHO to be diagnosed with coronavirus, because Tom Hanks is the nicest fucking guy in the world, right? And he has been, I kid you not, everywhere. Do you want a selfie with Woody? Absolutely. I loved you in Philadelphia. Give me your phone and give me a hug. It's just been like, run, Forrest. Like, why don't you run with me? I'm sweating all over you. He's absolutely been in Bondi Beach, one of the major areas here in Sydney, at the Sydney Opera House. My producer, who is pregnant, was 2 rows behind him for 2.5 hours on Saturday night. She's had to get tested and self-isolate. And so does all the
everybody
wants
their picture
House.
with Tom Hanks. He's a super friendly guy. He holds their phone. His hands, his grimy
phones
corona.
are the dirtiest things in the world anyway.
Yeah. Oh, man, he's a super spreader.
So they are the super spreaders of all super spreaders. And you know what? It's a delight being infected by them, I got to say.
You have young kids. You've got the twins that are what, 4?
5.
5, and of course your older one, Leo, is 9. And now they're all. You all have to be isolated. Can they not have any friends over or go to any friends' houses either? No,
they have to be. They have to self-isolate with me. So they're called, from what I was told by in the emergency by the triage unit, they're called a third-party risk, which is extremely low. So unless I develop symptoms and I get test positive, they just need to be isolated until I'm tested negative, and then they can go back to school and hang out with their friends and infect them.
But they can't see their friends for 2 weeks. They can't see anybody for 2 weeks. And
if I turn out to be positive, they can't leave the house for 2 weeks. They're stuck with me. God forbid, in this house in 2 weeks for 2 weeks. So it is,
and you're not.
That's the most concerning part.
Do they also advise your wife's out of town this week? She's coming back tomorrow. But do they also advise you to not touch your kids?
Yeah. So what everyone's talking about self-isolation, and the other buzzword that people are sort of talking about online, and something that we all need to start practicing, is what's called self-distancing.
Right.
So if you are in like social circles, if you are in a busy office in the middle of the city, it's best to stop touching, stop, using, unnecessary equipment that you're sharing with other people, and certainly no hugging, high-fiving, lots of stuff. They told me yesterday, I said, well, look, I've been solo parenting. My wife's been out of town working.
Yeah.
I've been, what do I do with my kids? So they want to kiss me goodnight. They don't understand. They said you can't kiss them or hug them for 2 weeks just in case, which is hard. Yeah, it's harsh. I said, what about bathing? They said bathing's okay with soap, because you're around soap, but try not to, and just do your best.
Can you still hit them for disciplinary reasons?
Well, I use a stick anyway, so I think that's
that qualifies
I like to pull.
as distancing.
I have a big stick. And it's a distance thing for me, and it's good exercise.
Well, I just got to say, you and I talk every day. You've been counseling me every single day through my job loss and depression and everything. And the toughest thing I've seen you go through is when, dude, you were more upset when your window was leaky than when you have a potential virus. I can't even, it's just, you're handling this very well.
I think it's the existential threat of it is not nearly as threatening as when we had the superstorm here after the bushfires, which flooded our entire east coast of our nation, and caused my roof to basically my kitchen to collapse while my wife was in New York having a lovely dinner with you and seeing shows. Gone to those days, and my kids' windows were going, and I was on Skype, on FaceTime with you, or on Marco Polo with you, and we were ripping up my carpet, going, "What am I going to do with this underlay, Pete?" And you were advising me.
It was the most helpful I've been in months. Get a wet
dry vac, and that was just because I go do handyman stuff. Health stuff, washing my hands, I can do. Any handyman stuff is going to play into my anxieties much more than media and health.
That's hilarious. Let me ask you this: would you follow, and a lot of Aussies do, and a lot of folks around Western nations, English-speaking nations especially, you follow American news and politics extremely closely. Yeah. Would you rather be here in your situation or there?
No, I think you guys are in. Well, look, I don't want to sound too alarmist, but I don't think you guys are well prepared at all for what's coming.
Right. You think you're more? You guys are doing. You have drive-through testing there, don't you?
We're about to start drive-through testing in some states. The government is trying to do funding of that. We're trying to learn the lessons from nations that have already going through this.
Right.
We're still scrambling. You can read today in the papers that the Formula One racing here was really botched in how they handled that this morning. The drivers were furious. They didn't want to drive. I think Daniel Ricciardo just got on a plane and left this morning. There were queues about thousands of people trying to get in. He's a Formula One racer, one of the champions. So there were queues around Melbourne, to get in. And then basically the government said it's not going to happen. We're only going to televise it. And then they said, no, it's not happening at all. So, we're still fudging some things here, but at least our healthcare system is at least slightly prepared. I don't know if we're fully. I think our messaging in commercials and TV ads and radio ads about what to do and what to expect and how to handle this is still mixed here in this country, and I'm hypercritical of that. But at least we have a plan. I think when you've got a president that calls it a hoax in 1 minute, when you've got a whole channel devoted to the fact of disseminating truth out there,
right.
You're misinforming huge sections of the society there. And the society that watches Fox News are the generation that is extremely vulnerable. I can't stress enough. Please make sure your parents are washing their hands, going to the doctors, getting checked. Yeah. You don't need to panic buy toilet paper like we did in Australia, but do stock up on necessities in case you do need to self-isolate and practice self-distancing.
Yeah, I still don't understand why people are fighting over toilet paper and not food.
I think for a while there, Australians thought that the whole thing was about diarrhea, but this is because we're not getting messaging from the government. Right. I think this is due to the fact that if the government's not talking to you, you go into, it's the zombie apocalypse. What do I need the most of?
Have you guys seen mass cancellations of things? And we've canceled Broadway, all the major sports leagues, the NCAA basketball tournament, schools, colleges, religious, Catholic mass, any gathering over a certain amount of people in certain places. Have you started to see that there?
Well, the Formula One is a big one today. So that's a worldwide event.
That's a one-day race.
It's a one-day race, but it's a 3-day event. So they have, it's a one-day race.
We just canceled the baseball season here. I mean, my kids' school is going to be in schools are canceled. I mean, the reason I ask is I wonder Like, how are we going to deal with this? Like, how is humanity going to deal with this? This is like some World War II shit, but even, I'm not going to say worse, but like it's going to be extremely challenging for Americans, especially given the way that we live. And I just wonder if that's going to happen in Australia or other countries where you really have to kind of, you can't go to work, you can't go to school, everybody's cooped up at home.
Yeah. Well, our football season, so we have a rugby league season and we have an Australian football league season where we all fly around and chase the football. That all starts this weekend. We've had the women's international cricket, which is just cancelled. And Katy Perry came out here and performed for that. We're having concerts starting to cancel here. Miley Cyrus cancelled her bushfire fundraising concert. She cancelled that this week. So, we've had certainly big events start to cancel. Other events are they're just trying to kick the can down the road. Events that are booked in June and July, they're trying to go, no, it's all going to be fine. I think they're kicking the can down the road for now to hopefully that this is going to be manageable. But I don't know how we deal with this as a society, Pete, except we have to stop this sort of BS of like, I think you'll find the Spanish flu was worse, or I think you'll find that pneumonia kills more people. I've been listening to your podcast, as you know, from the beginning, not just as your friend, but as a fan. And you've had a lot of great experts on there talking about, we still don't know what the effect of this is going to be. We need to be extremely mindful and extremely careful. But I take heed about what you said on the weekend on MSNBC, and we need to take care of each other and not rely on the government for helping us here. So, this is about our own sanitation. This is about social distancing, self-isolating if you need to, looking after your family and looking after your neighbors in your street. If someone on your street is old or going through a hard time, well, then it's time to cook an extra, pot of stew for them and leave it on their doorstep so they've got something to eat for a few days.
And your friends have been doing that for you, right? Taking care of you?
Yeah, my buddy just dropped over a cup of coffee and he picked up my washing. I answered the door in a mask because I'm still at risk. And I just said, put it all there. Thanks so much. And so he just picked up a few extra things for my kids too. And he picked up some, sanitizing stuff so I can clean my surfaces.
All right. Well, I'll let you go and I'll talk to you later. I got to put this all together now. I got a lot of work to do. I want to get this into tomorrow's podcast. I hope everybody listening will follow my best friend in the whole world. That's David Campbell. And he's on Twitter at DC Campbell 73. Is that right?
It's David Campbell 73. Can you even get it right?
My
what sort
God.
of friend are you?
I'm Gary V's
I've
friend.
supported you through everything. You can't even get my handle right.
Don't you have enough followers?
Follow Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson as well. Let's just see how this plays out.
At David Campbell.
I got that beautiful Hollywood version of this too. It's really nice, man. It's like
you
different.
got the Hollywood Corona?
I got the Hollywood Corona. It's a real different strain, I think. It's really the preferable one.
Did you see Chet Hanks' video?
I did. Why no shirt? Why hat backwards?
I don't know, but the greatest. It's pretty much the most amazing thing I've seen in a long time. At David Campbell 73. All right.
I love you,
I'll
man.
talk to you later. I love you too, buddy. Bye.
Bye.
Well, there you go. He sounds good, right? Sounds like he's doing just fine, huh? I'm sure he doesn't have it. I'm sure he didn't get it from Rita Wilson. He'd be showing signs. What the hell do I know? You know what? I don't know, which is why I reached back out to Dr. Meghan May. I think this is the third or fourth time I've spoken with her. She is an expert on a lot of things. She's a microbiologist, but she's an infectious disease expert. And she is Dr. May 5 on Twitter, a great follow on Twitter. We had a very serious discussion about everything I could get to in about 30 minutes. And then coming up, not saving the best for last because I don't want to disrespect Campbell or Meghan May, but I had another really thoughtful, great conversation with Wajahat Ali. I hope you're listening to all of today's show because I think it's like a chicken soup for the soul in a way. All right, here's my conversation with Dr. Meghan May, and it's a real good one. Dr. Meghan May back with me. Such a great resource for information. So great, by the way, on Twitter. A lot of you have discovered her Twitter. If you haven't, Dr. May 5, the number 5, Dr. May 5, university professor and expert on how viruses spread, microbiologist and infectious disease expert. Meghan, welcome back. Thank you for joining me again.
Thank you for having me back. I really appreciated the time talking to you and getting to know you and your audience a little bit.
Yeah, and they appreciate getting to know you. So, first of all, let's just talk about, the latest events. The president came out and gave a speech, and he announced a travel ban from the EU. We don't have to get in the politics of it. Obviously, the biggest absurdity is he didn't tell the EU. What do you make of that stunt? Because I hear they have a lot of the drugs and tests that we need over there, and they got to ship them. I guess we're going to allow shipping now. Trade.
It was nice of us. Yes. So this was, to me, the biggest part of the speech that was disappointing, because it's purely a stunt. It's purely a stunt. And I think it's very important for people to take that point away from it. There's a lot of coronavirus disease in the European Union. There's a lot of coronavirus disease in the UK. There's local coronavirus disease in the United States. So stopping travel from the European Union would do absolutely nothing to change our circumstances in the United States. So that's point one. Point two is technically he didn't stop travel from the European Union. He stopped EU nationals from coming from the EU to the U.S. A U.S. citizen who's in the European Union can still fly back here. A UK citizen who's in the European Union right now could still fly back here. And UK citizens could fly from the UK here. And
EU citizens could just go through London, Heathrow, or wherever to get here. I mean, they can get around it if they wanted to. That's what you're saying.
Or they can fly to Canada and drive. So it's very easy to get around, first of all. Second of all, again, there's this idea of, think about Ireland for a minute. So if I'm a UK citizen, or if I were an Irish citizen, if I fly from Dublin, I can't come. If I fly from Belfast, it's fine, because one of those is in the EU and one of those is not, even though they're X number of miles apart, and that just doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't seem like there's any strategic thinking behind it at all.
No, not at all. And also, we have community spread here already. And, it isn't as though the idea of blocking EU nationals couldn't stop an infected U.S. citizen who is coming from Germany back to the U.S., which, again, is not part of the ban.
Are you saying, it sounds like what you're saying.
I'm saying our cells are not so star-spangled awesome that they are inherently resistant to coronavirus.
American exceptionalism, or more specifically, your passport isn't immune.
Last I checked.
Yeah.
Not last I checked.
So speaking of travel, I mean, this is a travel thing, and I think then we can talk about the difference between college closures and K through 12 closures, because it has a lot to do apparently with spring break. Speaking of travel, is that the deal with college closures?
Yes. So a number of colleges and universities have recently announced that they're going to close for a few weeks or close even for the rest of the semester. And some are in the midst of deciding one way or the other. The reason why that's different than a K through 12 school closure is that imminently, it being the second week of March, you are either having a lot of college students currently on spring break, or you're about to have a whole bunch more go on to spring break. They're going to leave their university. They're going to go somewhere else in the country, either to visit family or to, go to someplace warm and just relax. And then they're going to fly back to campus. And when they fly back to campus, if they're undergrads, very often they live in dorms. And dorms, military barracks, and daycares are some of the most fantastic places to spread viruses and bacteria and all other kinds of other disgustimals around. And so the problem with that is, if we had everybody just staying on campus and not doing this big mass exodus and then mass reconvening in a dorm, that might be a different situation. But that is what's about to happen. And that is very risky, given, again, we have community spread in the United States. One of the questions that people keep asking about, well, why are these colleges closing if there's not even a case there? That's why, because they want to keep it that way.
Right.
And it's different, again, from K through 12 closures, because there isn't that element of we're going to go somewhere else and then all come back to our community. There
and
isn't
share a
an element
shower
of
and share a dorm
share
room.
a shower and exactly.
Yeah.
And
Have sex and hook up. I mean, that's
all those other good things.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so you don't have communal living when you're dealing with elementary and high school kids, usually, unless you're dealing with a boarding school situation. But by and large, K through 12 public schools, people don't live together. The other piece is that younger children seem to be a very minor part of this epidemic. The overwhelming majority of cases worldwide have been in adults. And so we don't know the capacity and the extent to which children can carry and shed this virus, so they may act as vectors. But while there have been a few cases in children, it's a really minor number. And so it's a little bit different than when you see school closures during, say, a major flu epidemic, because children do get very sick and they do very efficiently spread the virus around. But this doesn't seem to be quite the case with this one.
We have, from what I've read and what I've heard, you're the expert, we don't really know why kids aren't suffering from the worst effects of this, much less infants, right? Like little kids.
No, we really don't. I mean, the best guesses that people in my line of work have is that there's something pathologic about your immune response. And, little kids do not have quite the same immune capacity that, say a 30-year-old adult does. And the immune response of an older person, while it is certainly a little bit weaker and less precise than a 30-year-old, sometimes their inflammatory responses kind of go bonkers because they're trying to compensate for the fact that their very precise immune response has aged out a bit. And so when you think from the standpoint of your immune response is what actually makes you feel sick and feel bad and cause damage to your tissues, it makes some sense that this virus, if that is manipulating that response somehow, it would be worse in adults than in children. But again, that's a best guess. We really don't know.
Better than my guess. Okay, so let's talk about testing. This is a really controversial issue. It certainly seems like the biggest scandal. When you look at South Korea, my friend, by the way, I didn't tell you this before we started taping. This is kind of weird. But my best friend is in Australia, David Campbell. I talk to him a couple times a day. And he is now on quarantine or isolation. Maybe we can talk about the difference because he just interviewed Rita Wilson, of course, Tom Hanks' wife.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
How about that?
But my understanding, he went right to the hospital. He got a swab, I guess, a test. And my understanding is that Australia has tests. South Korea has these drive-thrus that we're seeing. The United States of America, however, is not prepared for the tests. What is the difference between what they're doing and what we're doing in terms of preparation and tests and availability of tests?
Okay, so most of the labs in the world are using the same strategy to run these tests. And what that strategy is that we're using a particular target that's part of a gene of this virus, and we're trying to detect the genetic material from the virus. In this case, it's RNA rather than DNA.
A single RNA strand. I'm learning.
Look at you, single-stranded RNA.
Yeah.
Well, that is my whole job kind of thing. Teach people about nerdy science stuff. But basically, the reason why we had some trouble and other countries did not is that even though we're all using the same strategy, we're using essentially the same target. When the first tests were generated here in the U.S., and the first kits were actually manufactured and put together by the CDC at that point, one of the controls failed. And so what that means in terms of an experimental control is that you couldn't rely on the result. So just to think back on this, a good example that people can kind of wrap their head around. Okay, imagine this. You are in one of the aforementioned college dorms, having a good time after spring break. And 2 weeks later, your girlfriend needs to pee on a stick, and you really need the information that you get to be correct and reliable, right?
Yeah.
So if you think about a home pregnancy test, every home pregnancy test has two windows on it. One gives you either some kind of a line or a dash or a whatever that shows you this test worked the way it was supposed to, so you didn't operate it and use it incorrectly.
Right.
And the other one tells you, is this a pregnant person or a non-pregnant person? Right?
Oh, I'm very familiar with them. Mine notified me that I needed to set up a college fund. Never did it. Anyway. Just a dollar sign.
Yeah, I've got a few of those too. It should be a dollar sign, but
so the pregnancy test analogy,
right, would be that. So imagine if that other window, the little sign that tells you yes, this operated correctly.
Mm-hmm.
If that wasn't there or it wasn't working, would you believe what the other window said? You know what I mean?
Right.
So all of a sudden, that gives you a really visceral, oh, God, that information would be meaningless. I got to go get another one, right? So what happened with the first batch of tests was that the negative controls, the controls that you run that are supposed to look blank regardless, it tells you that your test is working and you don't have contamination in it, that was coming up positive. So somewhere in those testing reagents, there was a little bit of contaminating material that was causing every test that was run to be positive. So
the CDC failed at running their tests here in America, whereas in South Korea and Australia and other countries,
right. So in other words, it would be the same as something failing a QC check. And if something fails a quality control check, it's not a usable batch of whatever.
Well, how come though? Do you have any idea why? How do we? It just seems. I know a lot of people listening to these conversations go, well, how come we couldn't get it right? I mean, all the science aside, can you just give me a simple answer as why the CDC couldn't do what South Korea's equivalents, whatever their agency's called?
I think that the answer to that is, there is a thing that's a little kind of deflating to hear, and then there's a thing that we can get all good and frustrated about. The thing that's deflating to hear is that these tests sometimes fail QC. And that's why you do it on every single lot of everything that's produced if it's going into a clinical laboratory, because the answer cannot be wrong. So every so often, these things just fail. And that, unfortunately, is what happened here. It could have happened in South Korea. It could have happened in Australia, but it happened here. The reason that we can get good and frustrated is that we didn't start trying to make it as perhaps soon as we could or should have.
Got it.
And that way we would have had time to engage other partners and engage the private sector and said, look, here's the roadmap, here's the design. We need to make as many of this as possible and get it to as many labs as possible. And the reason why this delay was so critical was that if you think about now what's happening, if somebody tests positive and they've been in contact with everybody around them, all those people go into quarantine and some fraction of them become infected themselves.
Right.
All those people we could have been quarantining early on perhaps could have stamped things out. But that, alas, is not what happened.
Where are we with the tests right now as of the 12th of March?
Well, it's interesting. There's what we're told, there's what's going on, there's an upcoming problem, and then there's reality. So if anyone had the opportunity to watch the congressional hearing where Tony Fauci and Robert Redfield were interviewed to give some information, one of the things that became clear is, because this is such a fluid situation, we can't give an exact number on how many people have been tested. Some states do have the exact number. My state of Maine, we know exactly how many people have been tested because we've had a pretty low burden. We've had no actual disease yet. So it's easy to keep a handle on our number.
Well, now that you said that on the show, everybody's going to head up there to shelter.
So, everybody's going to shelter, and then we're going to have all the cases, and that's okay.
Okay, so you're able to track the tests there. Go ahead. Sorry.
Right. But other states, it's, if they've got so many cases and there's a lot of moving pieces, it's harder to nail down the exact number. So that being said, it looks like there is more availability, but it's changing daily. Again, also because the private sector is now also involved, but they're trying to trial their tests and make sure that they work against a background of a clinical specimen, which is a little bit different than running a test in a perfect, purified, research laboratory setting where you can control every little thing, and not a swab that went up somebody's nose that might have 3 other things infecting them, and plus a nosebleed, and plus they drooled on the swab. It's just a much less clean situation. And so companies are trying to make sure, does my test still work under, those kind of worst case scenario conditions? It's really hard for a clinical laboratory to onboard a new diagnostic test. And it sounds stupid. Why can't you just run the test? You have the swabs, you have the kits. Why can't you just run it? The reality is clinical specimens are unbelievably diverse, and they're unbelievably finicky. And so if you have a swab that's been sitting around for half an hour and you're trying to detect an RNA virus, RNA is a very ephemeral molecule. It does not hang around stably for very long. If you've got one that's been sitting on the bench for half an hour versus one that came straight out of somebody's nose and then went immediately into the machine, your quality is a little bit different. Your limit of detection is a little bit different. If you're talking about a swab versus fluid pulled out of somebody's lungs, it's different. So it's not as easy as it sounds.
How quickly do you get the results? Like, I feel like there's a rapid strep test. How quickly do you get the results on a test for COVID-19?
So for this guy, if you've got a low testing volume, such as my state, tests are coming back within 24 hours. If you've got a state with a high testing volume, and then you're still talking maybe 2-3 days. But that's, again, as the number of available tests changes, then that number is pretty fluid as well. It doesn't take weeks the way it might have at first, because people were just doing entire genetic sequencing of fluid from lungs to say, are there any viruses of any sort in there? Oh yeah, there's one. That takes a lot of time. It's very, very accurate, but it takes a long time. This takes much less time, but it's not quite on that same rapid level of a strep test or a pregnancy test or a flu swab either.
All right. So what about some of the cancellations that you're seeing in terms of your expertise and how these things spread? How far is too far, and do you think it's too extreme? One person tested positively, one player in the NBA, they suspended the whole season. In New York City, they're saying, or I feel like guidance in general is, any gatherings over 50, they've shut down Broadway. What do you think is a large gathering? Social distancing. What is too far, if anything, or too extreme, if anything? Because obviously the question is about a balance in terms of, can people be able to take care of their kids? Can they go to work? Can they enjoy anything in public anymore?
Exactly. So to start with the NBA, and we're talking a little bit beforehand. My husband and I were watching an NBA game last night when this news broke that Rudy Gobert had tested positive, and they were suspending the rest of the games. And Cindy turned to me and said, "Come on, that's got to be an overreaction." And I thought, yeah, that is weird for one person. And then 2 minutes later, it hit me. Because they had already decided to play to empty stadiums. So you're taking the crowd out of it. But it occurred to me in a second that, that's a logistic problem, right? So Rudy Gobert is one guy on one team, but all his teammates are now going to have to be in quarantine because they've been in contact with him, and the coaches and everybody else, but importantly, the teammates. And now Donovan Mitchell has also tested positive. That came out maybe an hour or so ago. So a second Utah Jazz player. But all of the So everybody he's been in contact with for 14 days prior is also going to have to go into quarantine.
Right.
And so I just looked it up on the NBA site. That would mean the entire Cleveland Cavaliers, New York Knicks, my Boston Celtics, Detroit Pistons, Toronto Raptors, and Oklahoma City Thunder are all also in quarantine. So the logistics of that is, how can the league kind of move forward when
I'm seeing now, I mean, again, we're taping this, but breaking now on Thursday, the 12th in the afternoon, Major League Baseball expected to suspend baseball operations indefinitely later today. Wow.
Not surprising, and likely for the same reason. When you look at the number of Major League Baseball players there are, and many of them are doing trainings in spring training in Florida and in Arizona, both of which have cases. The idea that number of people, perhaps somebody's going to contract it sometime soon, and then you'd run into exactly the same problem. You'd have this kind of logistic nightmare where suddenly a bunch of your workforce, for lack of a better term, is in quarantine. Your work can't move forward. So it seems like, oh, come on, how ridiculous is that? It's one guy, and it's sort of like, well, if you think about it, this is actually a practical problem. And so that's the NBA.
I gotta ask, I see these charts that people put out on social media. I've always asked listeners of my show to look things up, be critical thinkers, and think of themselves. But I will often retweet like a chart or an image or something that my bias is predisposed to agree with, because it supports my predetermined opinions and so on. And I'm seeing
confirmation bias is a human thing.
Yeah, well, but when it comes to social media, we should be careful. And I don't want to, even though I like this guy on Twitter that shared this chart, I didn't want to just retweet it because I didn't see a source. Right. So my question to you about this chart is, the chart showed the cases of coronavirus in Italy and on what day and how they tracked with the U.S. How accurate is their measurements? Are there measurements in terms of diagnosed cases in Italy versus our measurements? Because regardless of how many cases are diagnosed, you do see how many people are dying, and you do see what has happened there in Italy, and it looks like they are charting and tracking very similarly, which a lot of people are then, coming to conclusions that we're going to have the same issues and we're going to have to deal with them the same way that they have. How close is our situation tracking, or how is our situation tracking to the Italians?
That the graph that you're referring to, it's got the blue bars for Italy and the red for the U.S.
The one I saw.
So those are real numbers. So what you can see from that graph is that we are tracking very close to where they were 2 weeks ago. We are now where they were 2 weeks ago. And so that means one of two things. In the next few days, really, we have to make some major, massive changes, or we will be in 2 weeks where they are right now. And can I just tell you a little bit about where they are now? Because I had, just for me personally, and this seems silly because I'm not a clinician, I'm a researcher, so I don't see patients. I occasionally get their goo in my lab if they're, suffering from some new weird thing that needs special diagnostics. But yesterday I felt, I think the best word is just anguish. And it was a bad day. And the reason it was such a bad day was it's a feeling of seeing a forest fire, being surrounded by forest, and knowing there is not a ton you can do to stop this impending thing that's coming at you. And the things that can be done are not in your control. And the reason why it was such anguish is there are published guidelines for Italian doctors and nurses that talk about, the polite term is clinical decision making. Yeah. But essentially what that means
you're deciding who's living and dying.
That's exactly right. You have one ICU bed left. You have one ventilator left. you have to decide of the 3 patients in front of you who gets that.
That's happening in Italy right now, and that's going to happen here.
Because if we don't do something drastic in terms of social distancing, there is absolutely no reason why that wouldn't happen here. We do not have a ton of flex in our hospital capacity.
Right. We don't have the capacity. We don't have the ventilators and beds and ICU units. Dr. Aaron Carroll wrote about this in the New York Times.
Yeah,
but let's
it's also still flu season. So, and as I believe Aaron Carroll also pointed out, it's like those beds are not empty this time of year on a good year where we're not having this.
Hospital modeling is to keep those beds filled with people. I mean, they don't want to have extra beds and extra ventilators because that's cost prohibitive.
There's been massive consolidation in the hospital industry. So you close smaller community ones. But the point being, and the reason why I just had such a visceral reaction yesterday was just thinking about colleagues being in this position of having to decide between these 3 patients because the 2 you decide against are going to die, and they're going to die in a really bad way. Dying of viral pneumonia is essentially, to think about the pathology of it, your lungs fill with fluid. So it's very much like drowning. And it's a really unpleasant way to go. And so we have people that are going to die in that way, and we know how to fix them. We know at the very least how to make it less awful, and we don't have in likelihood won't have the capacity to do it.
Well, as horrible as that is,
awful.
As horrible and awful as that is, I do want to host a conversation where we don't act like that's not the truth, where we're honest, because as I was talking with Wajahat Ali about this, we don't have an honest conversation about death and dying in the United States of America the way they do in other cultures and nations as well. And so let's be honest about that. As hard as what you just said is for anybody to hear, and it is horrific, and now we're all dealing with the same anguish.
No one wants to think about it.
But that's the case, and we need to do better, period, in every way.
No.
All of us.
No, we absolutely do, because death makes us uncomfortable, and so we don't talk about it. And so you end up with people who, don't have their wishes honored because no one knew what their wishes were, and you have
end of life decisions.
End of life decisions, and people are uncomfortable with palliative care, and there's all kind of that's a really important conversation that we as Americans really should get more comfortable with as our population gets older. But for this in particular, the idea of it's hard to explain how helpless that feeling is, to know that we have the solution. It's just we can't deploy it. And that is a helpless, defeated feeling. And
would you attribute that to any? I mean, that's probably a whole nother hour conversation as to why we're not able to resource the solution to this horrible problem, right? That's going to take us another long period. There's a lot of different reasons.
But I think we've kind of hinted at a few of them already. To just give like a quick teaser about it, I suppose, is that, as you mentioned, hospitals are consolidating, and their business model is such that they don't like to have empty beds. So we don't have a lot of extras at any given moment. It's the idea of that we were talking about testing earlier. Had we been able to test and quarantine more aggressive earlier, perhaps we would be in a different place than we are right now.
But why don't we have that? Like, why doesn't the government, or do other governments, might be a better question or answer, have like these government facilities prepared for pandemics so that you can handle the worst of the bell curve when it's all coming at you at the same time? Why doesn't the government fund beds, ventilators, have a special place, a mountain somewhere where you can move those? I mean, we spend so much money on defense for, quote, national security. Well, this is national security. I don't think people care about how. I'd rather die, by the way, in a terrorist attack than suffocating to death. And so I want to spend my government, my taxpayer money on ventilators and beds and healthcare and people that are going to be able to provide it. Do other governments have better priorities?
So here's a way of pitching it. So this is just to imagine this for a second. If we had if we had an empty facility that was there just in case, and we had staff on standby and materials on standby, and nothing happened for 2 years, what do you think would be on the budgetary chopping block?
Well, it should be the F-35 jet that also doesn't get used and doesn't work and nobody wants. I mean, that's the point. I understand the politics of it, but
but you're right. There are many things.
There's
in the
so much waste in defense
that you could kind of point to and say that's the empty hospital right there. But there's that element of it. The other thing to point out too is that we had some high containment. We have some high containment hospitals that are meant for these kind of things, if we can detect them and control them very quickly. So the University of Nebraska has one, for example. There's NIH itself has a hospital with a containment wing. Emory University has a hospital with a containment wing that's kind of run jointly by the CDC. So we do have these facilities. It's just that they're not very big. They're not very widely used. So these are the hospitals that when we had in 2014 and 15, we had kind of that handful of Ebola patients, that these are the hospitals that they went to. So those things do exist. It's just not enough for what we need. And so I'm hopeful that we will all take a very hard lesson from this. And another hard lesson from this is that, there's a purpose to government. And
priorities and taxes and morality and putting people over profit and understanding and respecting science and scientists.
Well, thank you. I agree completely. But it's an important thing, and it's an important thing to keep in mind that not everything is supposed to have a profit margin, and not everything is supposed to, run in the black. If you run your government at a profit, you're kind of doing it wrong. That means you're denying a service you should be providing.
Well said.
I mean, not that we have a problem with that at the moment, but it's so.
All right, I'll let you go. I know there's a million other things that you wanted to say, but I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I want to let you get
another time.
Yeah, soon, hopefully. Dr. Meghan May, always a real pleasure. I really appreciate you joining us. You're providing a very valuable public service here on this podcast, and we will continue this conversation. Follow her right now on Twitter. That's @drmay5, @drmay5. Thank you very much, Meghan.
Thank you so much for keeping talking about this in a real and expansive way. I appreciate it.
Holy shit, that was sobering as hell, huh? When she started talking about the way that people are going to die. I was talking to my friend Jason down in Louisiana, who thought maybe we were overreacting a little bit, social media and so on. I understand that. I totally do. I mean, the disruptions that are going to take place in our lives are pretty daunting to try to fathom and try to imagine how we're going to get through this socially and emotionally and economically. And I think scientists like Dr. May and other doctors and experts aren't as concerned about our social lives or our bills. They're saying this is what needs to happen to prevent this disease from spreading, to flattening the curve. And we're not really concerned about whether or not you're going to be able to pay your phone bill. Sorry. We're not concerned whether or not you and your spouse are going to be at each other's throats all day. You're going to be having troubles with your kids, etc., and so on. Maybe I have no idea what the hell I'm talking about, but that's the argument I was making. Okay, let's get to my final guest, and he is one of your favorites. He is the CNN contributor, the lawyer, the playwright, the American Muslim, the hilarious, brilliant, thoughtful father and husband, and good friend of mine. He is Wajahat Ali. Follow him right now on Twitter, where he is prolific, one of my all-time favorites. I check his Twitter feed every day, multiple times, because he's so smart and funny. That is Wajahat Ali, Ali, at Wajahat Ali right now. So, Waj, are you there?
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, I'm recording now. Can you talk?
Yeah, I can. I'm good. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Wonderful.
So you were tweeting, obviously, about your daughter. We're thinking about those in our lives that are vulnerable, older folks, people with immune issues. What's the story about with your daughter?
So my daughter, for those of you who don't know, was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer almost a year ago, last April. She was 2 at that time. She's 3 now. She had something called hepatoblastoma, which only affects 1% of kids, a freakish occurrence. She almost died. Thank God in September, she got a full liver transplant. And as a result of that, and, chemo and healthcare, which I believe should be a right, not a privilege in this country, but I digress. And knock on wood, as of January 2020, just 2 months ago, she is cancer free. However, for those of you who have ever, had family members or friends who have had cancer, leukemia, you know that the road towards recovery is not complete. She's getting stronger. She's finally getting her hair back. She's still immunocompromised. She's on medications, right? She has come back from near death, and she is in a vulnerable condition, especially with the fact that she has a foreign liver in her belly, and she, has these medications, and she's almost 6 months out from her liver transplant. With coronavirus, what we've seen is the low number as of today. The doctors said in the United States is 1% mortality rate. It's gone up to it's high up to 6% if you take on all the cases. And if you really try to capture that, it's so interesting because we're so terrible at math in this country. I've been having so many conversations with people in restaurants, and I really have. I've been trying my best to educate people because people see me on TV and they ask me about this for the last week. Yeah. And so many people just don't get it, right? They're not stupid. So many Americans really just haven't taken the time to really process what this means. So one person was like, "Oh, 1% mortality rate, that's not that bad, right?" I'm like, "Just do the math." And she literally said, "I'm not that good at math. You tell me." This was my hairdresser. I just went for a haircut. And I said, "Okay, the flu is 0.1%. 0.1%. So if you get 100 million people who are getting infected, and that's what they said today in America alone, that's thousands of people that are dead. And this is affecting people who are above the age of 60, so our parents, and those who are immunocompromised. So it's gonna rock our nation, man, because we don't talk about death. We don't talk about sickness. Our healthcare system is not prepared. We have a moron, an incompetent buffoon as the president. And I'm not just saying that to take shots at him. I mean, if you don't believe me, just look at the last 2 months.
Yep. Been terrible the way that he has only looked at this through the lens of how it affects him politically. I mean, I understand any politician looking at how almost anything they do say affects them politically, but at some point, and I would say that point is an illness like this, a flu, you don't blame the president when there's a viral outbreak at the beginning, but if he's not prepared, the government's not prepared, at some point, the responsibility falls to him. And this guy, as I said last night on television, I'm trying to say everywhere, he doesn't care about anybody, Waj. Doesn't care.
He doesn't care
about anybody. He only cares about himself. Doesn't care about his own family. I mean, if his sons were on that cruise ship, he'd have been like, leave it out there.
Of course. He's a germaphobe, and people forget that Melania and his previous wives, they don't stay with him because apparently when they have their monthly cycle, which is nature and biology, 51% of this population, women, have to go through that. He doesn't allow it. It's just the sight of it, the smell of it bothers him.
Is that right? So this is
I never heard that. You didn't know that?
No.
Oh yeah. Look, no. He's disgusted by menstruation.
Oh, I love it. Was that weird?
So, and if you look at all the tweets that he's done for the past 2 weeks, blaming the Democrats, blaming the media, blaming everybody but himself, tweeting out nonsense against Jay Inslee, tweeting out nonsense against CNN, literally zero. You just pretend to be a leader, man. Just lead. And I said this, and someone said, "Oh, this is a really bold thing you're saying." I said, and I say it again on your show, I'm actually rooting for him to succeed because, unfortunately, he is the president of the United States of America. And then as commander-in-chief, if he succeeds and is competent, that means people will live.
Right.
So I want the president to actually succeed during this crisis. The fact that he can't even pretend to be a leader and care is a bad sign, people. It's a bad sign.
Yeah, he's woefully unprepared for this. What do you think? How do you think if it affects his rock solid support. Does the fever break the fever, Waj?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. And I've said this on your show for a couple of years now, that I believe the only thing that will move some, not many, not most, some of his base will be immense personal pain that they will suffer as a result of his policies. Coronavirus and the recession will bring about, unfortunately, that immense personal pain.
But
it will move some. It will not move most or many. It will move some. And what we've already seen is, I don't know if you have had conversations with folks. I mean, this is all anecdotal, but I've been talking to a lot of people. Some people finally, I'm talking about conservatives and Republicans who are just going to vote for him. Not his cult, but they're like, I'm going to just vote for Trump. They're like, yeah, I think he's incompetent. Like, it takes something of this stature, a crisis that will cause not just immense pain, but actually death. I want people to get prepared for this. Like, people are going to die. This is what's going to just shave off some. That being said, the scary part is many of them will ride him and coronavirus to their death. Like,
that's what I wonder. I mean, is there a term in politics for blaming the wrong catalysts or causes for an outcome for your problems? Because you could have, a politician pass a policy that directly affects you negatively and still have your favorite commentator or anecdotal experience explain it in a way that you're not blaming the right people or causes. And what I mean by that is, if you are going to blame President Trump for not handling this well, and the recent polling on it, Waj, is that he's not handling it well, apparently. I don't know if that polling matters. How many people are going to blame him and his ineptitude and his lack of concern and understanding of science and ignorance and putting politics first for the fact that they or someone they know got sick, ill, or died? I mean, how do you know that they'll blame him, if any of them do, his supporters, I mean?
Yeah, because so basically what you described is what Trump has done for the past 4 years, right? Like, literally blamed everyone. And so what's going to happen, and what's already
happening, cover in the media, and like Hannity comes out with a thing, and then he just copies that excuse or reason, whoever it is, Rush. And yeah, sorry to interrupt you, but
so both things. So first, examining the right-wing ecosystem, right? It's not just Fox News. It's the radio, it's the lobbyists, it's the think tanks, it's the commentators.
Yeah, YouTube, blogs.
There's only so much you can do with coronavirus and a massive recession, right? But they're still going to do it, and that's what I was going to say. Is you saw Kevin McCarthy, a representative from California, who was the House Minority Leader, try 2 days ago to reframe it as a Chinese coronavirus, and he got blasted for it. And I remember I did something, you never know what tweet goes viral. And then I said, in America, we refer to it as a CPAC coronavirus, because one of the CPAC attendees was infected. And I'm pretty sure, what, I'm doing an over under, like, who got it. I think it's Mulvaney. I have no proof for that, but I'm pretty sure it's Mulvaney.
Why are they saying that somebody has been diagnosed with coronavirus that was in attendance? And there's
yeah, man, at CPAC and APAC.
I know somebody diagnosed, but I didn't realize there were rumors that it was a high level. Are you just making that up?
Some of us are just saying that, and the reason why. Okay,
that's
but
why
the reason why
North. That's why I demoted him as chief of staff and sent him to Northern Ireland because he got corona.
There's this great video of him coughing and sneezing while on the panel, and then all of a sudden he got booted. And then think about, the reason why I think it's so high level is, just think about this, just logically, right? Ted Cruz has self-quarantined himself. Doug Collins, Gates should be doing it, but Gates is going to Gates. Gohmert is going to Gohmert, right? But if you think about it, how do you come into contact with those high-level conservatives? Like, you just can't be an average Joe. Really, if you think about it. And then Trump is shaking hands with people at a Florida rally. Gates is on his Air Force One. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people in the administration actually already have coronavirus. But the point is, you're trying to see them blame everyone. China, immigrants, Democrats. He tweeted today trying to blame Democrats. The reason why I don't think it's going to stick as much is he's the president. This is a crisis that you really can't blame on anyone because it's a virus. Viruses don't discriminate. We've seen Italy and China and South Korea show leadership, and then you've seen Trump literally be behind the curve.
Yeah,
people are going to die. The recession, it's going to happen. Like, the economy, you've seen the stock market. This is not good, man. Eventually, again, the cult will cult until the end. They will ride him to the blazing sunset. You just need to shave off enough. And I think that's what's going to happen. Independents, people are skeptical. Republicans who held their nose and voted for Trump. There's a lot of smart people out there, friends of ours who are conservative, but they know he's an idiot.
Yeah.
The cult's going to ride with him to the end. But can the GOP and Trump Republicans afford this type of crisis? I don't think so.
Well,
and this is where I think you're going to see some people turn on him.
Yeah, you got to wonder if come, election day, if there is an election, if he doesn't call it off. I'm calling it off. No election.
Yeah, he might actually. That's actually, I know we joke about that and people think I'm an alarmist for 4 years, but so far, the stuff that I and others have said,
Well, it might not be
not
a terrible, but it might not be a bad policy. I mean, the substitute would be to find a way for people to vote from home. But I mean, you could have I think you can have a fair public health debate about the remaining primaries. It'd be a political nightmare and disaster if they canceled out people's votes in the remaining primaries, and you can't cancel election day. I mean, but you also don't want everybody to be in the same place. It's a fair public health concern, but the idea,
I mean, especially for the next 2 or 3 months, right? Because we don't know how this is going to play out. They say, usually viruses dampen down, especially in the summertime. And then if you see this week, China and South Korea, as a result of being super aggressive and doing stuff that America should have done but didn't. And just to give you an example, for those of you who are listening, South Korea has about 50 million people, right? It's like a few more million than California. South Korea has been testing people aggressively daily. I'm talking about like more than 5,000 tests. They've tested more than 200,000 people. And finally this week, the reports are that China and South Korea at least now have this slight advantage on coronavirus. Like it's there, but like it's kind of regressing. Okay. The United States has done a total of less than 5,000 tests.
Why? Do we know why we don't have the tests and why South Korea and other countries do? I mean,
my wife, who's a doctor, and she's been on top of this for 2.5 months because of A, our daughter. We have to be super vigilant, and B, because she's a really good doctor and has friends in the infectious disease communities who are experts. She's been following them, and she told me, she goes, listen, man, these people aren't alarmists. These are very brilliant men and women, and they're saying this is going to spread. My wife has been on top of this. She says, and this is not just her, she says it's the incompetent leadership that is to blame for our delayed response, top down. And you've seen like these ruptures, right? Like you see state officials get pissed off at the federal government. People are like, sniping each other. The CDC wants to be more empowered. Trump's budget cuts will actually take money away from the CDC. You see how Pence is in charge, the same guy who wants to pray the gay away. And the same guy, when he was governor of Indiana, there was a HIV epidemic outbreak because like he didn't believe in medicine. That guy, by the way, is in charge of coronavirus. So good luck, America. So you see like when science and the right people aren't in charge and we don't have a fluid policy top down and we don't have leadership, this is what happens. And then you compare it to South Korea, where they're like, we're going to get this shit under control no matter what. And voila. The huge difference, man. And now it's not just about prevention. Now it's just about containment, because now they're like, it's done. It's over. It's going to spread. Like today, they were saying at least 70 to 100 million people are going to get this. And for those who are listening, that's what they said today. 70 million at least. For most of us, don't freak out. 80% of us are apparently not, like nothing's going to happen. It's going to be like a flu, or like we won't even notice it. The problem is we're going to be carriers and we're going to spread it. And then it goes to the point of which we start off the conversation. If you're above the age of 60 and you're immunocompromised, and the mortality rate on this thing is from 1% to 3%, just do the math.
Congress in-house doctor told Capitol Hill staffers at a closed-door meeting this week that he expects 70 to 150 million people in the U.S., roughly a third of the country, to contract coronavirus. Two sources briefed on the meeting telling Axios. How do you keep your daughter as safe as you can?
Man, this is honestly the only worry. Obviously I care about everyone else, right? But like my wife and I were like, we don't care if we get it, but we were living with this immunocompromised daughter, and my wife is slightly traumatized, and I don't think she admits it. Then she finally kind of came around and admitted it. Like she's gone through so much, in particular as being the primary caretaker. Like we were in and out of hospitals. You know our story the last year. Yeah. I mean, our daughter fought for her life. I said that without any hyperbole. And so you see this 3-year-old girl who's so brave and so strong, who just struggled to live and went through so much. And so that's the only concern, is like, and then she's almost at her 6-month date after her liver transplant. And usually after 6 months, they say that, if she's getting healthier, if he or she, whoever's the recipient, gets healthier, they're like, okay, they're in the clear. But they're not really in the clear. And so what we've been doing, and this is a always look on the bright side of life type of perspective. We've kind of been prepped for this for the past year.
Right.
We've our whole lives have been disrupted, money, jobs, social life. We're super vigilant about sickness and germs. We have a bazillion hand sanitizers before hand sanitizers were all the rage of 2020. My son, who's 5, is a pro. He knows how to clean his hands. And my daughter knows because we talked to them about cancer. We talked to them about coronavirus, and they're on top of it. My son's like a G. He goes, Baba, there's something called coronavirus, and everyone's might get it, and that's why we have to be careful, and we have to stay home, and we can't go out. I'm like, that's right, son. He goes, yeah, okay, no problem. Let's just play now. So you have to just, for those who are listening, the next 2 months, I believe, and I hope I'm wrong, but I'm just, look at the tea leaves. It's going to be tough 2 months for America. It's going to stress our resources, our patients, our healthcare system, our leadership. Things are going to get shut down, man. Things are going to get shut down. Just be prepared. And so for the next 2 or 3 months, we're going to have to adapt to a new normal. Unfortunately, that new normal has been our normal for the past year. And you just do as much as you can, and you leave it to the hands of God. What else can you do, man? What else can I do?
Yeah. I mean, we talked last time about how your faith really gets you through that. Is that really what is helping you cope the most right now? Or are there other coping mechanisms, behaviors, ideas that you're practicing to make sure that you don't go absolutely insane with the idea of bringing that virus home?
Yeah, I think it's training because we've gone through it. So it's a lived experience. Mm-hmm. Number one. Number two, education goes a long way. Just being informed. My wife is a doctor, and she helped me get the leg up on this, and I've just been reading up on it every day because of my daughter. And again, I go back to the point that a lot of our fellow Americans don't take it for granted, man. People don't know. If you just have a 5-minute conversation with people and just explain to them, I've done this for the past 2 weeks. You just see their eyes widen. They go, oh, literally at restaurants, like I said, people see me on CNN. They're like, I was at this Pakistani restaurant. He goes, Wajahat, tell me about coronavirus. And I broke it down. He goes, shit, man, that makes sense. So education, being informed, lived experience. And I do think for me, faith does help, because there's a great saying in Islam. It says, you have faith in God, but you also have to be responsible. So the analogy goes like this. Have faith, but also tie your camel. Tying your camel means you do what you can as a human being to make sure your camel doesn't escape. So you tie your camel. If there is some freakish accident and the knot gets loosened, then you just leave it in the hands of Allah and say, okay, I have faith. But we do what we can in the meantime. Does that make sense?
I think so. I mean, I don't know how to put it in a more secular framing, but I guess just being in the moment as much as you can.
Yeah, be in the moment. Be vigilant, be diligent, be responsible. Do whatever you can in our limited capacities as human beings, as we are facing this inexplicable, unforeseeable cosmic crisis, right? Who are we? We're nothing. I think about it. I just told my wife, man, I'm like, how the hell can I fight a friggin' virus? Who am I? Who are we? We're just nobody. We're when you gave me that number of a friggin' 100 million people, and I've been following this, and God, you can only, let me put it this way. It's you see those disaster movies like Contagion or 28 Days Later or Walking Dead.
I don't watch it.
No, but there's only so much you can do, right? There's only so much you can prep. And if you're an experienced swimmer, there's only so much you can do, but you're a human being going up against a huge current. What the F do you do?
How do you
a huge wave?
How much of it's almost you can be as optimistic as you want, but there's only just so much you can do, and there's only just so much you can ask of yourself and expect of yourself before you can't fix it. No one is impervious to a virus. You just have to be as vigilant as you can. But we're also a generation of humans, or 3 generations, however many generations are alive at one time, that have never experienced something like this. Yeah. And I wonder how much you're thinking about how we cognitively and consciously and as communities will deal with this. How much time or thought have you put into what this does to a society? I mean, or are there experts that have thought this through? And could you possibly make any predictions based on the technology that we have available to us right now, the economic situation that so many people are. How much have you thought about it all? How we're going to get through this next 2 months as a species, as a community?
I've thought of, and believe it or not, you might laugh at this, but people have been thinking about this, and the way we usually think about this is through fiction. There's a reason why the zombie apocalypse narrative in the last 10 years has really taken off. There's a reason why a lot of these types of horror movies have taken off, is because most times horror movies are the good ones, reveal a lot about the fears and anxieties and paranoia of the society at that time. Like in the 50s, it was all about the communist scare, right? Which is, you saw this huge influx of horror movies, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, for example, right? I think the reason why these shows kind of unconsciously have taken off is because people are so terrified about these uncontrollable phenomena, climate change, the rise of racism and nationalism, the failures of institutions. And what could be more destabilizing than a freaking virus, like literally nature, like bitch slapping all of us, right? And as we, based off of just the conversation, like who are we at the end of the day, despite all of our money, our power, our wealth, our science? We're just human beings. How do you tackle this? And so the way I've been thinking about this, and I'm actually going to write an article about this. I just pitched it like 20 minutes ago to New York Times, and they said write it. I don't think we've in society talk about death ever in America, which is fascinating to me, because like the only thing that is guaranteed in life is death. I was going to say taxes, but like the rich people found a way to get around it.
Yeah. So, no, I think it's a subject I discussed on the show before, just a little bit. And I think I'm psyched that you're going to write about it, because the rest, I don't know about the rest of the world. It seems like something specific to America, unique to America, but certainly the West more than other places, certainly underdeveloped nations. I mean, how do you look at it from the point of view of another nation, another society or culture, the death, how it's seen? Yeah,
right. Like, so we don't talk about death. We don't. We
try to defeat it here. Yeah, no, we're not going to do it. We're in denial about it.
Yeah, we're so much so that like we punish people for getting old. Like she looks like she's 47 because she's 47. like you know what I'm saying? Like we will talk about anything else except death, even though that's the only thing that's guaranteed for all of us. I just find it fascinating, and I do feel like people will die as a result of this. Our elders. As many elders will go. And I'll give you an example of a conversation I just had very calmly with a friend of mine. His father's 90, his mom's in his 70s. And he's like, I discussed with my brother about buying burial plots for my parents. And I had this conversation with my mom, because we're going to lose people before it's all said and done. But have you made a will? Have you talked to your parents? Are you taking care of them? What about our senior citizen homes that takes care of our parents? What about our healthcare system? You know, right now we're talking about, the cost of healthcare, which is such an absurd, sick conversation to have, that we treat healthcare as a right. Well, coronavirus might reveal to people, oh shit, maybe all of us are deserving of healthcare. If we can spend trillions of dollars on the military, why not healthcare? How will we treat foreigners? How will we treat immigrants? We've already seen how there's a spike in anti-Asian discrimination. Right. I've seen this already here, right? Like my wife's telling me that people don't want to see Asian American doctors, born and raised here.
Yeah, I've read about that. That's insane. Yeah.
So our faith in institutions, our faith
I demand
in leadership.
One.
No, but I'm saying, like, think about it. It's like a crisis reveals both the best and worst of a nation and people and individuals. And I believe the next 3 months, I fear and hope that we're going to see both of those extremes. We've already seen it with the Republican Party, the Chinese coronavirus, conspiracy theories, blaming everyone else but ourselves, right? The Trump trying to promote the border wall. You saw the Supreme Court today upheld his just cruel immigration policy that, keeps asylum seekers stuck in Mexico. And the funny thing is, they'll probably be like, okay, as of this week, they're like, sure, we'll stay in Mexico as long as you want. No problem. You, America, deal with it. Or the flip side of this is, it's like that movie. Like, what character will you be in the horror movie? The one who freaks the F out, runs and hoards all the supplies, is the asshole. There's always that one villain who's the asshole, tries to like outrun the zombies and like throws the old lady to the zombies.
Yeah.
But at the end dies. Or do you want to be like that hero who can maybe help one another? That's what I'm really curious to see.
Is it weird that I'm not positive? No, I want to be the person. Like, I'm thinking about this with you a lot, actually, because we've been talking about doing something together. Like, what if we can't leave our houses? Like, I want to be the people that connect each other and help each other get through this. You've been through so much. You're such a smart, curious, thoughtful, hilarious guy. So, we're going to need to talk to each other, especially older folks who are isolated. If you're isolated, you're alone. Like, I do want to create a community online or on air somehow where people can connect and can share ideas and can support each other and can help one another out. I think that's going to be extremely dire. I mean, my worst fear about, obviously the worst fear is health concerns and so on, but like, is that the internet somehow goes down, that we can't connect and then the rumors all start. I mean, I don't think we're going to get there, but, I like the idea of keeping people connected somehow socially. I think that's going to be really important, to share ideas and show support for each other. What do you think of that?
Well, but it's in that your instinct is one that is like rooted in like just evolution, right? Because human beings are social creatures. Like back in the day, to be exiled was basically a death sentence because you didn't have a tribe. And as we've seen, like with more and more science come out, loneliness is a killer in the 21st century. And so if you're not going to work, and most people just watch in the next 2 weeks, man, they're going to things are going to get shut down. And you've already seen it. It's Wednesday. We've already seen it. Yeah. Like NBA, Golden State Warriors, my home team. They're doing games without fans. That's going to be the norm. Rallies, I think, are going to be shut down. Biden already called it. Bernie called it. That was responsible.
St. Patrick's Day parades. Yeah,
parades, festivals, cruises, airplanes. One thing that we haven't talked about is the economic impact.
I want to talk about that with you, and I just don't know. I don't know how to talk about it. How do you think about each and every industry? I'm first thinking about people like my wife and I who, are not W-2. We're not salaried employees. Anybody who works, gets paid for the gigs that they do. I'm so happy I've got, the support I do on Patreon. Who would have ever thought that would have been such a, but maybe those people start canceling as they start tightening their belts. But how are people that are certainly far more vulnerable than my wife and I, because, we've got some money put away to pay our mortgage, but in Italy, they're offering mortgage relief, apparently. Like, how much have you thought about the economic impacts, Waj?
This goes back to my training from the past year. As a result of what we've already been through, I've shared this with you before. People assume just because you're on television, right, or if they hear Pete Dominic or they see Pete Dominic on MSNBC, you and me share the glorious night owl.
I was accused last night of being this rich, elitist, liberal. Well, yeah. It doesn't matter, liberal, like rich, elitist. I'm like, dude, I just lost my job. I'm struggling to find health insurance that's affordable. All my gigs are going to be gone. Every comedian, anybody who's a live performer, and my severance is about to run out. And, my daughter has scoliosis and needs a brace, therapy, and potentially, hopefully not, but surgery. That would be a couple of years away. But like, just because I'm on TV doesn't mean, most of you probably have a better situation than I do. And, your situation, Waj, is
it's the same.
Tenuous.
It's the same. I mean, yeah. So people, like, I got accused of being part of something called the DC Muslim elite, which sounds so awesome. And like, and I'm like, dude, is there like a uniform? Do I get a jacket? Like what? And the people are just convinced like I'm some all powerful, like nefarious being just because I'm on TV and write for the New York Times. But the reason I mentioned that is we've survived the past year. It was tough. I couldn't work. If I had a 9-to-6 job, I would have had to, I would have either gone fired or I would have had to quit.
Take care of your daughter.
We have to take care. We still are taking care of our daughter. Like my wife and I were joking yesterday. She's like, we need to come up with a normal schedule. And I'm like, okay, I just laughed. And then like just today, like things were disrupted again, right? Because like we're easing into it, but still, this is training for, I think, what people will have to face for the next 2 or 3 months. A disrupted life, disrupted social life, disrupted economic life, where you have to make ends meet, where you have to rely upon each other, you have to rely upon a community. You will need help. You will need to help each other. You will have to have a lot of patience, a lot of tolerance, and you have to always have some faith and hope. And this is where maybe faith comes in handy, that there is some light at the end of the tunnel. Because if you can't imagine that, it becomes very bleak. It gets very dark very quickly. And I feel like when it comes to the economic impact, just think about it, right? Delta and American Airlines said they're cutting back flights 10 to 20%. Just do the math on that. Travel industry, cruise industry, rallies, anyone, performers. Okay, that means
fundraisers for nonprofits.
Fundraisers. That means people are staying home. That means they're not spending money restaurants,
theaters, malls, retail.
I was going to go to South by Southwest. I had an amazing gig at South by Southwest.
Oh,
it was
really?
going to help my career. Oh, it was going to pay me so well. I was the host for South by Southwest channel. I was interviewing all these awesome people. I was getting back into my hosting gig. They were so excited to have me. I signed the contract. I was going to go there for 2 weeks. All my stuff was going to be on YouTube. It was going to help my career. It was going to give me so much money that we desperately needed. South by got canceled. I'm grateful. I'm fine because so many people in Austin are screwed because South by brings in $350 million. Where's that money going to go? How are you going to make up that money? So many people are going to get hurt. And I feel like people are going to get laid off. And
no doubt. Yeah.
And then think about our country, like in a weird way, I think, again, enough people will be like, we're the most powerful, wealthy country on earth. If we can build Space Force, if we can give a $2 trillion tax cut to the rich, if we can build a stupid wall, if Donald Trump's idiotic sons are getting paid millions of dollars for being just his sons, why aren't we investing in a safety net, in Social Security, in Medicare, in food stamps? And this is where Republicans will really need to answer for decades worth of cruelty, in my opinion. In a strange way, I hope that this really makes us really think about our society in America, which I think prides itself on a myth of being like so tolerant, open, and like, generous. But like, if you look at the policies, people are struggling.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. What does this pandemic make us do in terms of looking at ourselves, in terms of looking especially at our healthcare system, where it's this whole idea, there's this conservative ideology where, you only deserve to get health insurance if you work hard, or if you work for it, if you get it through your employer. And then if you are sick, it's your fault, which has always been a myth. And the rest of the world looks at us and goes, what the hell is wrong with you people? But maybe this virus, there's nothing you did right or wrong to contract this. You're not going around licking, handrails. You did everything that you could right. And by the way, you had good health insurance, but someone or the system, the healthcare system, it doesn't matter if you have good health care insurance, Waj, if the hospitals are too taxed to see you, if you're not one of the worst off, or your child, God forbid. And so what does it mean? How does it make us think about the future of the healthcare system, as you call it, the safety net? It's going to have to unify us to some extent to create a better safety net, a better hospital care and insurance system. I want to believe that.
The flip side also, and because now that you did the yin, let me do the yang, is it will also reveal people's innate cruelty and also some of the cruel actors. Because some people will just want Elysium. That's the reference to the movie where the rich live like on the moon, right? And the poor just like suffer.
Right.
But then it could also be very humbling because exactly what you said, doesn't matter how wealthy you are or how of a super mensch you think you are, or how like God has like favored you, or like how much you believe in meritocracy, or, it doesn't matter if you're part of the Aspen crowd, you too will be affected by this.
Well, your business, your investments get affected. That's why you think about paid sick leave. Maybe this will make employers rethink paid sick leave because they think they're paying out too much. They're giving too generous of a benefit when in fact, if they don't do that, then somebody comes to work sick because they need the money, then they lose all their business. I mean, it's a very easy economic idea to understand. The rest of the world understands it intimately well. We're just so cruel and selfish and such short-term thinkers that we don't realize how important that policy is for your bottom line if you're a business owner.
Yeah, and that's what Biden said yesterday. And like, I understand his position, but he said, like in his response to Medicare for All, like this was like 2 days ago, he says the cost. What about the cost? The trillions of dollars. I'm worried about the cost. Like, how are we going to pay for it? And that's exactly it. Like the way we even think about healthcare is a sin in this country, right? That like we attach a cost to literally the health and security of our people.
Well, it's also an economic idiocy. I mean, it's morally, sinful.
Yeah,
but
because in the long term, right? Because it's economically inefficient. We have one of the most inefficient healthcare systems in the world, and then we think, oh, the short term cost. But this is how America's trained, right? Americans are like, oh, the taxes will go up, and then no one ever says your taxes will go up, but your costs will go down.
Right.
If there, God forbid, is a crisis, voila, right now, the system is actually in place to take care of people. Think about the repercussions. It's like one of those, just those amazing situations where I'm not going to get insurance because nothing bad's going to happen. Then something bad happens, you're effed. Right? It's like,
of course.
it's like if we actually invested in our people, in our healthcare system, you actually end up saving money in the long run. Not only do you actually end up saving money in the long run, you actually have healthier, more productive workers and people and a society. And if you've ever gone to Norway, I have been there.
Yeah, I have been there.
Look, you can't do a tit for tat, right? But you go there and people are happier. They're like, yeah, we pay more taxes, but our government actually takes care of us.
It's crazy to think otherwise. I have very little tolerance for arguments outside of it at this point. But before I let you go, you got a couple more minutes to talk about
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
I do. I mean, every conversation, every issue we talk about has to probably be seen through the pandemic at this point. But I was on MSNBC last night after the Super Tuesday 2, where Joe Biden pretty much ran away with it. And I, went off on the air about how you've got the Bernie supporters have to fall in line here. I understand. I mean, I was a Elizabeth Warren supporter. I didn't want Joe Biden to be the nominee. But at this point, we all have to fall in behind whoever the nominee is. And there's those of us who have always said that, no matter who it is, even Bloomberg, God forbid. You've been tweeting about this and talking about this. What do you say to somebody, especially the Bernie supporter watch? What is your answer? Do you think that there's a convincing way? I think I might have been a little condescending, but it pissed me off too, because I'm like, I don't have, my life is not great. I understand why you want Bernie. I get it. I understand why you want those policies, but there's civics and the realities of politics. And the fact of the matter is that the president of the United States currently is an absolute maniac, a madman, a sociopath. We have to replace him no matter what. What is your convincing argument? And, how do you not piss these people off more and lose them?
So, perfect is the enemy of, I think, good, sustainable, and rational. And your frustrations and grievances are legitimate, and the crises that you face, we all face. But right now, there is a very clear choice between a Democratic nominee who at least will shepherd some of these policies or get to that goal versus a completely corrupt, incompetent, cruel racist whose policies, the consequences of his policies will be borne by the rest of us. And this is an opportunity where if you feel like you're absolutist and you refuse to vote for Biden or support him, just think about the rest of us. Think about the immigrant kids locked up in cages. Think about the climate. Think about the Supreme Court. Think about a woman's right to choose. Think about the Muslim ban. You are voluntarily making a decision to empower a bad faith actor who will make everything worse, instead of actually supporting someone who won't get you completely there, but might put you on the path.
I'm done with incrementalism. You can have it. I can't. I don't want.
Well, you
this.
have to. You have to. You have to have it because right now we're in a shitty situation, and it's either incrementalism or kiss your dream of a revolution goodbye because the white nationalists are waiting at the doorstep and they have all the power. Think about bringing the rest of us along, who you will need to join you in your path, or being fringe and literally your revolution dies with you and your absolutism. Because that's also the practical matter, right? If you feel like you can do this by yourself without the quote unquote DNC and vice versa, you're an idiot. And at the end of the day, if you really are committed to being absolutist, then peace out. I don't want to deal with you. You go and be an absolutist and dig your head in the sand. I will rally the majority and we will get there eventually, slowly, but eventually we will get there. The last thing I can afford and this country can afford is 4 more years of Trump. That's what I will say to them.
All right. That's a good place to end it. I appreciate your time as always, buddy. We covered a lot of ground and let's just keep talking. I mean, your voice is a really important voice, and I'm happy to get behind it anytime I can. And
How's your daughter doing?
So for people who don't know, my daughter was diagnosed with scoliosis a couple of years ago. I dragged my feet. My wife wanted to get her into therapy. I screwed up and feel bad because the curve probably got worse in the time that has passed. And so she's got to have a brace, and she has given me permission to talk about it. She says, it's my story to tell, but I don't love telling it, so you can go ahead. So she's not doing great. I mean, she's not doing terrible. She's a pretty happy-go-lucky kid. She's a confident kid, but this is, she's 16. So this is a huge emotional challenge. It's going to be challenging. And so, we're not there yet. We get the brace next week. So it's tough. I reached out to you right away because you've had the worst situation ever. And I know mine is far less, but, given the perspective and how good life has been, you say, well, I'm grateful that my kids, have their health until they don't. And then you just have to keep finding things to be grateful for and working through them. But, it's scoliosis. It's not life or death, but it's definitely, I think she feels like it's probably the death of her social life to some extent, pal.
How many years does she have to wear the brace?
It's hard to tell. It might be as long as, 2 years, might be a year and a half. It's a really, she's got to wear it and keep it on as much as possible, many hours during the day to try to stop the progression of the curve so she doesn't need surgery. It doesn't really correct it. It just stops the progression. So
it's going to help her in the long run. I mean, both with her health, but I mean, it's a shitty thing to say to a kid, especially at like 16, where, we're all 16 once, social life and hormones and growth and, boyfriends and parties and proms. But like this will season her and prepare her for what's about to happen in this world. So, as long as I think she has loving parents, that's the key thing, man. Loving, patient parents to get a kid through that. And then she'll hopefully look back on this and say, like, I was a badass who wore a brace, and that literally forged my steel, my steel spine. It was forged through that hardship.
Yeah, no, that's definitely the hope, and that is the long run. But right now we're at the very beginning, and it's pretty dreadful to think about it. My wife says, and I don't know what you think about this, but psychologically, like, you're torturing yourself when you spend a lot of time thinking about it during the day, when you are in pain and concern, which I've spent a lot of time thinking about it and worrying about it. And she says that's just not, you got to stop.
Yes. I did something, and I don't know if this will help you, because I'm like that guy. I ruminate a lot and think, and I just can't help it. I'm one of those. I used to postpone it until the late night and until my family and kids went to sleep. And then from like 12:30 to like whenever, because I didn't sleep, as I was doing other things, like that's when I allowed my mind to wander.
How do you postpone?
And I just, I tried to keep myself busy, or once it happened, I said, okay, I acknowledge it was happening, the rumination, right?
Yeah.
And
there
I'm
it
like,
is.
okay, there it is. Okay, got it. I'm going to focus on something else right now. And you just kind of starve it for 5, 10, 15 seconds. And then you have to occupy your mind with something else. Read something, go for a walk, just think about your taxes. I don't know. And
think
then
about your taxes.
It's tax season right now, and they might postpone tax season.
That would be interesting. Yeah, why?
Yeah, they're thinking about that. Yesterday, they're thinking about just to keep money in the economy. But basically, what I did is then you get a routine, and then like that became my I guess my weird self-help.
No, that's great.
I used to imagine it, right? And I used to imagine every single scenario. And this might sound really dark to people, but like I just had to mentally and spiritually prepare myself. Like, what happens if she doesn't make it? And so I used to imagine every scenario. It was like Doctor Strange and Avengers Infinity War, like imagining like the 4 million ways that the Avengers could die on the one path that they could beat Thanos. But that's the way I was able to keep my
that's helpful.
Functioning.
And it's also going back to what you said about being honest about, end of life, and that it's a real thing and it happens. And so, brings authenticity to that point for your own life. But right now, in this moment, everything is good. You're in the minivan. You've got Panera.
Everything's good. So far, the kids are happy.
Yeah.
Everyone's healthy. And, we have the resources as a country to really get through this. We just need the leadership. So let's hope it steps up.
Well, we'll provide it right here. So pay your phone bill, buddy.
Yeah, I'll pay my phone bill, and you guys keep giving the Patreon dollars to Pete.
Wajahat Ali, everybody. Thank you very much, pal.
Take care, man.
All right, watch Waj on CNN and follow him right now. Tell him you heard him on the show. Really support him at Wajahat Ali, Wajahat Ali, Ali, at Wajahat Ali. It is late on a Thursday, the 12th, and I got to put this baby to bed. Just got a text that my children's school district is closed. They just announced it. And so that's it. Shutting it down while we do not have a confirmed case of any student or school staff member having the coronavirus. We were informed this evening that a family member of a student at one of our schools has tested positive for the virus. Out of an abundance of caution, we will be closing all schools and the district office tomorrow, Friday, March 13th. That's it. Thursday, a rough day. Baseball's over. The NCAA is over. Worst market drop since 1987. And the president, well, is he leading? Here is the president today on the worst economic day since Black Friday, 1987, President Trump.
So typical, the fake news is calling this the worst day since Black Friday for the economy. First of all, we have a tremendous, very strong, very tough, very strong economy, like one of the best. Still doing so much better than Obama, even with a little hiccup with the corona. But we're doing so much better than Black Friday. Do you remember Black Friday with the Ice Cube and the loud black who was always yelling? Remember this? This was not even that good a movie. We're doing so much better than that. And I don't know if you remember this, but Ice Cube used to be not a great friend of our great Jewish people. He used to say some very mean things in his lyrics back in the day, as the blacks say, and we don't like Ice Cube. We don't like Black Friday. Much better than Black Friday. Trump Thursday, not so bad. Economy still doing great. Testing so many people. Utah Jazz, big problem.
All right, so that wasn't President Trump, but you believed it was, didn't you? Comedian JL Covan, at JLCAUVIN, at JL Covan, at Trump Pod for his hilarious weekly show. We need the laughs at Trump Pod, JL Covan. All right, I didn't get the plugs on this episode. It's been a long day. A lot going on. 3 great guests. I hope you appreciated it. Sign up on Patreon at patreon.com/Pete Dominic, and I'll be talking to you one way or another every day this week. And you are my brother. You are my sister. You are my mother, my father. You are my friend. You are my non-binary whatever. I'm thinking of you. You're thinking of me. I'll look out for you because you're my fellow human. Brace yourself. We've not seen anything like this. But I love you. We'll keep talking every day.